I'd like to welcome Dr. Nicole Niederdeppy. She is from our office, coordinator with Gifted Talented Programs, and she will be facilitating our presentation tonight. Nicole?
Thank you. Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you for giving a little bit of what I'm sure is a really busy week for everyone to partake in this presentation. Susanna Farfari is our coordinator that oversees parent programming in our office, and we felt that this was a really important topic for parents. We get a lot of questions about our unique talent identification process, and so we wanted to address those questions and give everyone some information. Again, my name is Nicole Niederdeppy. I'm also a coordinator. I work with the Conservatory of Fine Arts, which we'll be talking about later. And I also help with the identification of visual and performing arts, which we're talking about here. My email is nnn8729@lausd.net. If you have any specific questions, again, you're free to email me at this address. And we also have a general email that I'll post for you in just a second. Here we go. All right. Our agenda this evening is 4 things. First, we're going to talk about identification as talented. What's our policy? How does that work? What's the procedure? How do you make that happen if that's something that you or your child's school is interested in having for your child? Secondly, we're going to talk about our program option for talented learners, which is called the Conservatory of Fine Arts. We just completed our 40th season, so this is our 41st that we're in right now. And we're going to go over what is the conservatory and what do students learn in there. Thirdly, we're going to address briefly what are some other options for talented learners in our district. And then lastly, we'll talk about resources and do some Q&A. All right, so here's our information at Gifted Talented Programs. Our general email is gate@lausd.net. So if you have queries about anything, they go to the general line here at gate@lausd.net, and our person that monitors that email forwards it to the correct person to answer your call. Your message, I'm sorry. Our phone number, speaking of calls, is listed right here. We do actually answer our phones from, I believe, 8 to 5, 7 to 5. I think it's 8 to 5 every day. And you'll get a live individual. You might not get the person you're looking for. So we do have voicemails as well, but we are one of the offices that was first to, during COVID, maintain our phone line because we know how important it is to be able to ask questions and get them answered. Our fax is here, kind of old school. We don't use fax that often, but it is there. And then our address, if you ever need to mail anything, is listed below as well. We do have a pretty big website. Our website covers a lot of area. If you're ever curious about any of our other programs, there's a page specifically for parents. There's a page about schools for advanced studies and so forth. So if you have any questions and you don't want to call, you just want to get your questions answered, you can check our website as well. Okay, so what is our purpose in Gifted Talented Programs? Well, our goal is to identify students who are gifted and talented, including students from diverse racial, socioeconomic, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds. And then the second part of our goal is to provide high quality, differentiated opportunities for those learners. So it's kind of purposeless to identify a student as gifted and talented and then not do anything with that identification. So what we seek to do is both find our gifted and talented learners and then offer opportunities for them to use those talents, for them to have appropriate educational opportunities. As a district, we are very unique in that we identify students in 7 categories. Once upon a time, the state of California said you may identify kids in 7 categories, and LA Unified said, let's do it. So we do embrace more categories than any other district I've ever heard of, for one, and for 2, any of the other local districts around in Los Angeles. One area you're probably familiar with is our intellectual ability category. That's the one where our psychologist comes out and does assessments with students, and that can be anywhere from the second semester of kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So don't feel that if your child hasn't been assessed and they're in high school that they missed out, they can still do it. And that is the only category where the child might be identified as highly gifted. We also have our high achievement category. The first opportunity for that is with the OLSAT assessment that we give every second grader. And then we do identify in high achievement in grades 5 through 12 using, usually we use the state tests, the SBAC assessment. But since we haven't had SBACs for 2 years due to COVID, we've been using grades, academic grades to identify in that category. Similar to high achievement is specific academic ability, and that is students that you might see that have a high talent in math, but maybe not in language arts, or they're a really strong reader and writer, and they're not as talented in math. And so again, we typically use the state assessments and now are currently using grades to identify in that area. Our other 4 categories are creative and leadership ability, which we're not really going to talk about tonight, but both of those categories are grades 2 through 12. And in both of those categories, the school submits a portfolio of evidence to identify the student. If you have more questions about those categories, feel free to email us and we'll get you connected to the appropriate person for that. The categories we're here to talk about this evening are visual arts and performing arts. Both of these categories are also grades 2 through 12. And for performing arts, we do identify in 3 subcategories, which is dance, drama, and vocal music. We do not currently identify in musical instruments. There's a number of reasons for that. One being that there are limitless musical instruments in the world, and so it would be difficult to determine which instruments we were to assess and not assess. Then we would need to find individuals capable of assessing each of those instruments that we were able to assess. And then we would need to provide a program option for students who have that talent. And we don't have the resources to do any of that at this time. So we do dance, drama, and voice. It is possible for a student to be identified in multiple areas. As you may know, your child might be in intellectual and high achievement. But also with performing arts, a student might identify in dance and drama, or vocal music and dance, or drama and visual arts. We see some students that overlap in those categories. So getting to the crux of this, how could my child identify as talented in visual or for performing arts? What does that look like? All right, so all of our categories operate slightly differently, and the way that the visual and performing arts, or VAPA, audition demonstration process works is that we do it twice a year. We host it on the 3rd Saturday of May and the 3rd Saturday of November every single school year. So it used to be we didn't have the whole week off for Thanksgiving, but now we do. And so typically that 3rd Saturday in November is the very beginning of Thanksgiving break, which is unfortunate in some ways, but also a nice way to start your break. But that is typically when that event is. And then the 3rd Saturday in May, whatever date that may be. In order to audition or demonstrate at our events, a student must be referred by their school of attendance. So if you're the parents and you feel your child has this talent, you're going to need to talk to the school. Every single school has a gate coordinator. Sometimes that gate coordinator is an administrator, and sometimes it's a teacher, and sometimes it's a counselor or another person that works there. But the gate coordinator will have to initiate your child's referral in order to participate in this event. We're going to talk about the details of that on the next slide because it is a little bit more complicated than you may think. Our deadline for referrals at Gifted Talented Programs is 1 month before the event. So to give you an example, our next event is May 21st, 2022, and all paperwork must be at our office by April 20th, 2022. We run into this problem every single year, twice a year, that we receive late paperwork from the schools and they beg us, can I just have one, I just have three, I just have 17. But as you can imagine, that would add up if we accepted every late student, and we need time to prepare for our events. So we do not accept late paperwork from schools. If we do receive the paperwork after our deadline, what we do is just simply move it to the next opportunity. So if the child was supposed to audition in May, then they'll be postponed to November. And what we are looking for from the schools is really just three things. It's the parent consent forms, which we'll talk about in a minute, the school cover page, and then the completed referral on our student database, MISIS. In order to participate, a student must have a letter of invitation from us, from Gifted Talented Programs. Sometimes schools create their own letters about this. It's very strange, but if the letter did not come from us, then your child is likely not participating. We do not do day of events registration or on-site registration. All right, so at the schools, sorry, I have to move some things to see my own slide here. At the schools, every single category that a child could be identified in follows the same procedure. So this is helpful for our schools. Anyone may suggest a referral for a student. It could be the parents coming in this case, since you're in this might be you. It might be the teacher sees the talent. It might be the arts teacher that comes to visit once a week, notices a special talent in the child. It might be the administrator, at a school-wide event says, wow, this child is very talented. It could be the student, him or herself. We did have a high schooler refer herself a couple of years back because she found out about the process and she was identified. And it even could be a peer or community member where another student suggests that the student should be identified, or someone from the community comes in and gives the suggestion. Regardless of who suggests the referral, the school gate coordinator is to initiate that referral in our student database, MISIS. And once that referral is initiated, it doesn't guarantee it's going to go through. But what it does do is it assigns a teacher familiar with the child a checklist for that teacher to complete. Asking about the child's experiences in that area, and there's a room for comments on the bottom where they can type in their observations and so forth. Once that checklist is complete, the school has what's called a screening committee, and that is usually a teacher, an administrator, and a gate coordinator who come in and review referrals that have been initiated. So if your child's a visual artist, this would be the time where they might look at some of their work that they've done. If your child's a dancer, they might, talk to the arts itinerant teacher that services the school to see what their observations have been. And then the screening committee does have the power to decide whether or not to pursue the referral at this time. So they may say, yeah, good candidate. They may say, not yet, let's revisit this in a period of time. Or they may say, we don't see evidence of this being a good candidate in this category at this time. If the school does decide to move the referral forward, then they send home what's we know as attachment E, which is our parent consent form. And so that's the point in which sometimes parents get involved in the process, as they haven't realized all of these background things have happened beforehand. Once the parent consent forms are all gathered, let's say they have 6 students for visual arts perhaps, those forms are sent to our office with a cover page, and that is the paperwork that we are waiting on before we proceed with the student. So as you might imagine, this process does take a little bit of time. Sometimes we find parents going in on April 19th and trying to get all of this done by April 20th and get the paperwork to our office and so forth. You can imagine that doesn't always happen in a day. So if this is a category that you're interested in for your child, we recommend that you start early. When we return from winter break, go speak to the gate coordinator and get this process going, because it does take a little while and that screening committee might not meet every moment of the day. Sometimes people ask, my child attends a charter school, can they still participate? And the answer is yes, but so affiliated charter schools are those charter schools that are still in LA Unified. A lot of them are in the Valley. Uh, for example, I believe Dixie Canyon's a charter school, Carpenter is a charter school, I believe Topeka, schools like that are still district schools, Cleveland Charter High School, but they're called affiliated charters. And then we have our independent charters, which are the ones you may have heard of, Green Dot, KIPP, things like that, where they are authorized by LA Unified School District and can utilize our services. Either way, whether the school is affiliated or independent, the school must pay a $200 fee per student to participate. Our affiliated charters are generally expected to do so if they have good candidates, because they are expected to identify and service gifted learners as a part of LA Unified. But our independent charter students, the schools can choose not to utilize our services, and they have that right. As a charter school, they can say no. They can say, we don't want to spend our money in that way. And that's the end of that conversation, unless the child moves to an LA Unified school. So if your child does attend a charter school, again, you'll want to speak to the administrator to see if they are willing to participate in the process. Okay, so now we're going to go over sort of what's expected of the student in each of the categories. What do they do for this audition or demonstration? What is the committee looking at? So we're going to start with dance. And in dance, the student prepares a 1-minute age-appropriate dance to age-appropriate music, keeping in mind, that we don't want our students doing things that are not appropriate for school for their auditions. Dance does look a little different. Let me back this up and say that before COVID, we always held our audition and demonstration event live in person at a high school site, typically in LA Unified. But since COVID, we've obviously pivoted, like everybody else, to a virtual audition process. And so I'll talk about both, because we're not quite ready to return to our normal in-person events yet, but may be there by May. So it's unclear at this point what the next audition demonstration will bring. So for dance, again, either way, the student prepares a dance. And if they're in person, we actually have the students warm up all together with a dance instructor. Then they're called in teams of 5. They perform their individual prepared dance, and then they do an improvisation to music in front of our team of 3 raters. While we've been virtual, we've had to shift this a little bit. So the student individually performs their dance to our team of 3 raters over Zoom. And the student may be asked to improvise or do dance steps or otherwise if the raters feel they haven't seen enough. We do have very patient raters who help students center their cameras correctly so they can see the whole body, and they help them move stuff out of the way if necessary and all that. So we are able to get a good audition virtually as well. In drama, the student prepares a 15 to 30 line monologue from the play or film of their choice, and there's absolutely no profanity allowed. It's our number 1 rule. We don't recommend that students use individual material that they've written, original material, that they've written or that's not from a published play or film. But we do see it sometimes, but we don't recommend it. Whether in person or virtual, the process for drama is pretty much the same. The student performs their memorized monologue individually in front of a team of 3 raters. Sometimes they ask students to do improvisation as well to get more time with the student. I've also seen our raters ask them to perform the monologue with a different focus or with a different thought in their head and things like that. For vocal music, the student prepares a short song, 1 to 2 minutes, to music that has no other voices on it. So an instrumental track of whatever song they're singing. We do not recommend students audition a cappella. we have seen that as well, rarely, but we do recommend that they use the music. It makes a better audition experience. Whether they're auditioning in person or virtually, the student will perform their song individually again in front of a team of 3 raters. Sometimes the song that's been selected might not show the range of the child's voice, so they may be asked to sing their scales or a common song like Happy Birthday, in addition to what they've prepared. And so through that experience, our raters are able to assess, tone and pitch and things like that. In this category, I should mention that if we are live, students are to bring their own music on a device. Sometimes they bring sheet music. We do have accompanists. Sometimes the parent is the accompanist, and we allow that in this category as well. For the visual arts demonstration, the student will prepare their portfolio of 6 to 10 pieces of recent artwork. When we're rating this event, we rate the student compared to their age peers as part of the process. So we don't recommend having work that's too old for the student. So if they're in 3rd grade, we don't want to see necessarily their work from kinder and 1st grade, because it doesn't necessarily reflect their current age and ability. The way we've been doing it recently is that students submit photographs of their work to Schoology. We set up a class on Schoology. In the past, students have brought their portfolio to their in-person event. We are looking at continuing the online portfolio practice. So even if we go back in person, we may continue to require the online submission of portfolio. Whether the event is in person or virtual, the students do 2 drawings on demand in addition to the portfolio. They do a pencil drawn still life from a display or a photo. So if they're live, we have a display set up in the room in which they're doing the demonstration. Online, what we did most recently is have a photo of a still life that all students were to draw. And that way it sort of standardized what we were looking at. And then the second drawing is what we call a free drawing, which is just the student's choice of what they want to draw with the materials that are provided. And live, we typically bring a large box of art materials like markers, pencils, colored pencils, crayons, maybe charcoal. And since we've been virtual, we've mailed our art supplies. So they're kind of limited because we're mailing hundreds of these, but typically again, markers, colored pencils, and watercolor colored pencils, so that they can use that capability if they would like. So in that event, do keep in mind that our raters are trained to weigh the on-site drawings a little more heavily, because those are the drawings that students have definitely done without assistance, whereas our raters are aware that in the portfolio, students have a variety of help or support, or in some art classes, they walk them through the entire process. I've done one of those wine and paint things before, and I even turned into an artist, and I was shocked. So, in those types of situations, you can get really good art from people that maybe aren't the most talented artists. So we do weigh those on-demand drawings a little more heavily. This is a note for our families. This is us begging. If you decide that this is something you want your child to do, or the school has referred him or her for, or them, and you get an invitation to participate, please, 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 please let us know as soon as possible if that doesn't work for you. We do hire our staff based on the numbers of participating students, but we have a shockingly large number of no-shows. Students who just didn't do it, just didn't show up, didn't tell us. So we prepare and we hire and we pay staff and we send materials and we order things and this and that for students who basically ghost us. And we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. And if for some reason a certain event doesn't work for your family, like, oh, it's so-and-so's bar mitzvah that day, or we're going out of town or whatever, we are happy to move the students to the next event if that's something that you desire. So This is my word of advice. If you do end up participating in this process, please let us know if your child has a conflict so that we can postpone them to the next possible time to do the event. All right, so I've basically walked you through how the audition and demonstration work, but what happens afterwards? What goes on there? So before I actually answer that, let me just state that what we do with our three raters is basically add up and average their scores in the performing arts, and then we're looking for exemplary performance. In dance, looking for like flexibility and rhythm and things, and in drama, we're looking for characterization and body and voice and things like that. And then in voice, we'd be looking for pitch and tone and breath control and other things in this capacity. Uh, and then in visual arts, we're just looking for creativity and detail and use of media and things like that. But once our once our students have been rated, and performing arts goes a lot faster because they rate right away, and visual arts, they have to look at the portfolios. uh, Afterwards, a couple of things could happen. One, you may receive a letter that your student was found ineligible. The good news is, in this category, the student may re-audition or re-demonstrate after a year. They can do it once a year. So if they participated in November and were found ineligible, the following November, they could try again. We are aware that students get nervous, right? Our actors, either they're on that day or they just have a bad audition. We're aware that sometimes other factors happen in our children's lives where they're not at their best on a particular day or time. So we invite them to re-audition or re-demonstrate if you truly believe that they just had a bad day. If the student didn't get eligible, they can still apply to the conservatory, but we do accommodate our identified students first. So this typically is more of a problem in visual arts where there's a lot of demand for identified students. It's less of an issue in performing arts, where there's less, we just identify less students each year, and therefore there's typically more spaces for students who have not yet been identified. So you are still welcome to apply to the conservatory, even if your child was found ineligible. And I know this is different than like our intellectual category, where we typically only assess each student one time. If the student is identified as talented, we put that in MISIS, and that stays with your student as long as they're in our school district. So if you go to Long Beach, they probably don't care. They're going to be like, oh, that's nice. We don't do that here. But if your child stays in our district, their identification will follow them throughout their career. The school of attendance where they go to school is supposed to use this information to sort of provide opportunities for your child to shine. And I'm going to talk about that on another slide, what we might be looking for versus what might be too much to ask a school to do. But there are many opportunities in the classroom, in the school, and through after school experiences for the school to offer opportunities for your child. And again, like I mentioned on the previous slide, being identified as gifted and talented in the arts does give the student priority into the conservatory. What basically happens is students who are identified in November and students who are identified in May, both all together, we combine it all, and they all receive their invitation to participate in August of the following year. So there's no benefit to auditioning in November versus May. I will say the November is typically a lot smaller, so maybe that isn't a benefit. But besides that, there's no strategic reason to audition in November, because both groups of students have to wait till August to get their information about the conservatory. So looking at your child's school site, once they're identified, let's say they have it's called the little G tile. It says G, means they're gifted in one category. What is the school supposed to do? Well, these are just some examples, but the school should offer product choices that involve the arts. So if your child is a talented artist, then can't they show what they've learned through comic strips, through uh, I'm drawing a blank on anything else right now, through different opportunities for art, or they could perform a monologue as a character. They could create a dance to demonstrate cell processes. They could write a song about, Lewis and Clark. So we want to see this in general in our classrooms as differentiation, but we really encourage our teachers to integrate the arts in different ways. We actually offer 4 salary point classes for teachers to learn about how to integrate the arts into gifted. So there are opportunities for learning for the teachers there. We also suggest that the teacher use art and performance clips to support or introduce instruction and concepts. Let's show a clip of this movie to introduce this concept. Let's show this artwork by Van Gogh to talk about this concept. And not just art concepts, but science concepts and history concepts and even language arts concepts and things like that. We encourage our schools to host art shows and performances and encourage students to participate or take a lead in that capacity. So if they have, I don't know, a Cinco de Mayo dance celebration, encouraging the student to help with choreography. Or if they have an all school art show, encouraging the student to submit art that may, be displayed in the show and so forth. We also encourage schools to take students on arts related field trips. Of course, field trips have been somewhat postponed right now, but inviting artists and performers to speak to the class via Zoom or in person is always good. And then in secondary, students may be enrolled into the appropriate elective if it is available. Not all schools have visual arts and performing arts, but if it is an option for our students, we encourage the school to put the student into that elective where they can shine. This is a note that people are often confused with, is that talent identification does not help a student with the choices magnet process. Arts identification. So we identified in 7 categories, as I showed you before. And if you're interested in our gifted magnet programs in Los Angeles Unified or our Schools for Advanced Studies SAS sites, your child would need to be identified in intellectual, high achievement, specific academic, creative, or leadership ability. But they can also participate in those programs if they have qualifying test scores, or if the school verifies that they are able to do these critical and creative thinking skills. So the arts identification will not help them in this capacity. Also, Student Integration Services or Magnet does have 36 visual and performing arts themed magnets. So these are great options for students who are talented in the arts, but being talented currently does not give a student priority into these programs. Any LAUSD student can apply, and the magnet points process is the only priority process given to those programs. All right, so let's talk about what is the Conservatory of Fine Arts. You've heard about it, maybe, maybe not. We used to joke that it was the best kept secret in LA Unified. The secret's getting out, but and we're happy about that as well. But let's talk about what the Conservatory is. Basically, it's a Saturday program. So this isn't another school, unfortunately. Maybe at some point it would be. I'll be the principal. But until that happens, it's a Saturday instructional program for students in grades 3 through 12, which is why we identify grades in grade 2. So if a child gets identified in grade 2, they can start the program in grade 3. The lessons are based on the California Visual and Performing Arts Framework, which was changed recently. And we do include vocabulary and history and cultural context into the program. This website right here is the Conservatory website on our Gifted Talented Programs webpage. Our goals in the Conservatory is we want our students to become well-rounded artists or performers and develop their artistic potential. We want them to examine artists and performers of the past and cultural and historical periods. We want them to apply their processes and skills to make meaning and intent in both formal and informal works. We want them to be able to analyze and critique art. And we want them to connect to other disciplines in a multidisciplinary sort of way. Okay, to be clear, because this is very confusing for people, the Conservatory and auditions are not the same thing. You are not auditioning for the conservatory. You are not, which is what people say sometimes. And there's just a lot of confusion. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I'm going to try to clear it up right here. So the conservatory is a program option for students who have skills in dance, drama, voice, and visual arts. You must apply as a parent for the conservatory. The school will not apply your child. They do need to sign the application. The principal of your child's school needs to sign that application, but they do not initiate it or get your child registered. Students who are identified do have priority, but other students may participate as long as their school recommends them. And your student cannot become identified as talented by being in the conservatory. They could be in the conservatory for 10 years, grades 3 through 12, and never be identified. It's theoretically possible. They could be identified as talented in second grade and never, ever, ever, ever do the conservatory because they have soccer that they love on Saturday mornings. They are not the same thing, okay? To clarify again, auditions, demonstrations are one-day events that are held 2 times a year. And to participate in this, the school must initiate the referral, not the parent. The parent can speak to the school about the process, as we talked about, and get it going, but the parent cannot magically make this process appear. Students who are identified will receive an invitation, but they still have to apply. Just because you are invited to apply doesn't mean that a space is being held for you. You must actually apply to the program in order to have a space. And again, participating in conservatory will not refer a child for an audition or demonstration. All right. So in the conservatory, who provides the instruction? Well, we have a combination of performers and artists in the field, as well as Los Angeles Unified Arts instructors. So we strike a good balance between arts teachers in LA Unified, who have a better teaching background, and performers and fine artists in the real world who have a very good arts background and a lot of experience to share. I just went to the art show of one of our fine artists. He displayed in Pomona, still there. I'm not going to say the name because might not be appropriate for kids, but he is a painting artist and does have shows. I just watched one of our performing arts teachers on Netflix in a series that was picked up by Netflix. She was in a pretty big supporting role in that series. And so we do have experienced individuals teaching the courses in addition to our LA Unified Arts teachers. We also have a piano accompanist for all our voice classes and program aides that function kind of like TAs throughout our disciplines. In performing arts, if you're in drama, you might take acting 1, acting 2, acting 3, or acting 4. For voice, you would take vocal ensemble 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then currently in dance, our dance classes are divided in this way, where we have dance foundations, world dance, jazz dance, and modern dance. In visual arts, we do something kind of unique where the student does a 4-week instructional unit. The teacher plans a big unit. I'm trying to think of a theme of one: color theory, perspective, or something like this that would take 4 weeks, photography. And then over the 4 weeks, the student learns various things and comes out with a product at the end. What we have done in the past, being live, is we rotate the instructors. So perhaps the students stay together in a cohort and they would have 3 or 4 instructors over the year. Being virtual, that didn't happen. So we are just have 1 class per teacher right now, but are hopeful to go back to the rotating teachers thing soon. Here's some examples from students. I forgive the terrible photography here. Yours truly is the photographer of all of these pictures, and some of them may have been taken by my children, actually. So forgive the quality of the photography. But here's some examples of our students working on 2D work at the conservatory. Here's some students working on 3D work at the conservatory. This guy's making, I think, a giant God's eye thing, and she's making a sculpture. Here's one of our drama classes, getting dramatic. This is one of our vocal music classes, and the teacher's instructing, and they're taking notes on their scores. And then this is one of our dance classes, trying to strike a pose for me, I believe. We do have culminating events each year. So if you're not sure if the conservatory is something that you might be interested in for your student, we do recommend going to the show. We are scheduled at the Ronald H. Silverman Fine Arts Gallery on April 2nd. Again, this is dependent upon the COVID situation towards that time. We may be virtual. Last year's show was virtual, and we have a link to it right here that will be posted in the chat for you if you'd like to check out the artwork. Do keep in mind it was over virtual learning, which isn't ideal, but it turned out pretty nicely. And then our showcase performance this year, the theme is called Imagine, and it will be on the same day at Esteban Torres High School, which is about 2 miles south of Cal State LA, where the other event is. And we are, if we're in person, it will be in the late afternoon. Again, last year we did do a virtual show around the theme of our Ruby anniversary. So that can be viewed on YouTube. Here's some examples of some of the work that has been in our final shows in the past. A moment to take a look here. Here's my sneaking photos that I wasn't supposed to take in the performing arts show. So again, forgive the quality of these photos, but you get the idea of what's going on here. If you are interested in the conservatory, every single year, the application window does open June 1st. The application will be available on the Unified Enrollment website, also known as Apply, which is apply.lusd.net. And there's also a paper application available for those who are not able to utilize this internet app. Speaking, and this is the rest of the process. So once you have the paper process, it generates, once you have the online process, it generates a paper form, and that form must be printed and signed by your principal of your child's school. There is a charter student fee of $200 per student as well for affiliated and independent charters. Again, students who are not identified as talented may be referred, but there's a checklist that should be completed by a teacher familiar with their talent. And then all those forms should be submitted to Gifted Talented Programs by 5 p.m. on the stated deadline, which is usually the first Friday in September. Sometimes that weekend turns out to be, we have Friday off, and then it would be Thursday, but I don't know about next year's calendar yet. All right, so how else does LA Unified support arts talent? Well, guess what? All LAUSD schools provide an arts program. Our arts branch is very proud of that fact. And they have high quality arts teachers. This is the arts branch website if you want to look at specific programs that they offer. Dr. Stephen McCarthy is the director of the arts branch, and he's been really integral about ensuring that all schools have high quality arts instruction. Again, not all schools have all art forms, so sometimes that puts your child out of luck. There are 36, again, magnet programs in LA Unified, BAPA magnets with no special criteria to attend. Those are in the choices situation brochure. And we do have what's called our flagship arts high school, which is Grand Arts, which is downtown. They put Grand Arts where the old headquarters of LA Unified used to be. I have been there. And they do have a lottery enrollment as well as Belmont zone of choice if that happens to be your zone of choice area. I do know some people that got in there pretty late last year. So if that's something you're interested in and you didn't apply in a timely fashion, in some programs, they do have space a little bit later. In addition to what schools offer, many school sites do offer arts instruction in their after school programs. I put the Beyond the Bell website. That's who manages LA Unified after school programs. I do want to point out that we are in an arts mecca here in Los Angeles. And, you know, even for low income families or families that have a lot of income obligations, even if they're not low income, there are a number of low cost and or free arts classes offered by local organizations. For example, I live near Barnstall, and pre-COVID, you could take an arts class there for a number of weeks for like $24 or something. So there's a lot of opportunity here in this city that you might not get other places. And then also a lot of art studios, dance studios, acting studios, vocal and music studios do offer need-based scholarships for students to participate as well. So that's something to consider for your child if you feel the school is not fully developing their talent.